Um, Dr. Pankaj, is my screen visible?
Yes,
It's visible. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. So when I look at anemias, at least a couple of years back, even today, as Rahul pointed out, there are very few differences for a microcytic hypochromic anemia or a purely macrocytic, a purely megaloblastic where the MCV is more than 115, 120. You pretty much nail the diagnosis. The problems start when you have something like a normocytic normochromic or a slightly macrocytic, somewhere between 100 to 105, 110. And then you try to treat them with vitamin B12, iron. Most of these cases would get treated, by the way. Most of them would be nutritional anemia. But there would be the majority of them will not respond. And more worryingly, you would have people who would be having a normocytic normochromic anemia for quite a long period of time, for several months, for even years together. And they would then later on present with something much more sinister. And one would feel that this could have been served better if they had been diagnosed earlier. So I will not be taking up a didactic kind of a lecture at this point of the night. So last time I discussed it with Dr. Pankaj. So I prefer making a case-based kind of a presentation. So I will be taking you through 6 cases. The last time at the end of the talk, the last case presentation, the grand round that we had with EDPA, I discussed a case of a hypothyroid, like a pilot who had come to me in AIMS for their annual checkup, and his hemoglobin was 11. So I'm repeating that case. I did not put it up here because I'd already discussed it, but I'm just repeating it for the sake of people who had joined today. So he had a hemoglobin of 11, normocytic normochromic, and the only reason that come to AIMS was to get some kind of a clearance so that they can join they can join his job as a pilot. So we did the routine tests, vitamin B12, iron, everything else. This was a young male, 32-year-old. We ended up doing his thyroid profile. So his TSH and thyroid T3, T4 were all low. And to cut a long story short, he ended up having a pituitary adenoma. As you know, thyroid levels, androgens, erythropoietin, these are all trophic hormones which stimulate the production of hemoglobin. So he had a normocytic normochromic anemia because of that, and obviously that got corrected once he was operated. So this set me thinking, and since that time, I've always had a bit of a passion, particularly if I see someone with a normocytic normochromic or a mildly macrocytic anemia. It kind of presents a challenge to make a proper diagnosis. So anemia in adults, hemoglobin less than 13 gram per dl in males, 12 gram per dl in females. There's obviously a range, but many people have tried to put in different levels for different groups of people, blacks, then older or elderly people, smaller children. But it would be better to just have one cutoff so that you don't miss out something in the future. So the various causes for anemia. Now, anemia could be either because of a blood loss. So it could be a menstrual blood loss. It could be a blood loss from the gut. It could be inadequate production, which would happen in patients with an iron deficiency or with vitamin B12 or a folate deficiency. Ineffective erythropoiesis. This is where you have a bone marrow which is pretty much full of erythroid series. Everything is looking fine in the bone marrow. Maybe some degree of erythroid hyperplasia, but it does not translate into a normal hemoglobin into the blood. So the commonest ineffective erythropoiesis that one would see in India would be thalassemia. And then, of course, in adults, you would have myelodysplastic syndrome, where there is an ineffective erythropoiesis. Hemolysis, of course, it could be either extravascular hemolysis, like you would see with autoimmune hemolytic anemia, or it could be an intravascular hemolysis, as you would see with paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, or in patients with clostridial sepsis, burns. So those would be intravascular hemolysis. They would obviously present with jaundice and macrocytic anemia as well. I will not be discussing hemolytic anemias in this particular talk, that's a completely separate topic in itself. Anemia could also be because of a bone marrow infiltrate. It could be a bone marrow infiltrate because of a hematological malignancy, a non-hematological malignancy, or it could be because of a infection-related issues as well. Anything which is infiltrating the marrow, the person would present with anemia. Or a hypersplenism, where of course there would be pancytopenia. Hypersplenism most commonly that you would see in your routine practice would be because of a chronic liver disease with an enlarged spleen. And I must point out that an enlarged spleen does not mean that somebody should have a massively enlarged spleen to have pancytopenia. It could be it could be just a palpable spleen in somebody with chronic liver disease, and you could have hypersplenism. So these are more or less the most common subheadings under which you need to look for anemia. So the history and a physical examination is most important. So of course, blood loss is easy. You need to ask if it is a lady, you need to ask whether how's their menstrual blood loss. Anybody else, you should also ask. Everybody else, you should ask whether they have seen blood in the stools or black colored stools. I find it a good practice to point towards a colored item in the clinic or on their clothing and ask them whether this is how black it is or this is how green it is. The people find it easier to answer that way. Inadequate production, of course, for thalassemics and all, they're pretty much obvious during childhood. In adults, again, you would have, for example, in myelodysplastic syndrome, you generally present with an anemia requiring transfusion over a period of time. Hemolytic anemias would present with a jaundice. They would present with a frequent blood requirement. So they would say that we have been getting blood transfusions almost every week, every 2 weeks, and still the hemoglobin does not rise. This would be pretty much the way a hemolytic anemia would present to you. Bone marrow infiltrates, on examination, you could have splenomegaly. I would be also presenting some case where where the peripheral smear picture would show you how a bone marrow infiltrate picture would be presenting like. Hypersplenism, again, you need to palpate, find the spleen enlargement, and take a history of a chronic liver disease. When we look at the hemogram, I'll be showing you hemograms down the line after this slide. So we have got certain measured values. So the measured values are the hemoglobin, the RBC count, and the reticulocyte count. And in the hemogram, there are certain other derived or calculated values. Like you don't need to see these values. If you've got the hemoglobin, the RBC count, and you're pretty much set. So for example, if you've got the hemoglobin, you would know the hematocrit because the hemoglobin and the hematocrit have a roughly a ratio of 1:3. So if you've got a hemoglobin of 9, you've got a hematocrit of 27 to 28. So the derived values such as MCV in femtoliters, that is 10 into hematocrit in percentage divided by the RBC. So MCV is increased beyond a certain value. It is called macrocytic anemia, and that would be in megaloblastic anemia, so in vitamin B12 deficiencies, or in exposure to chemotherapeutic drugs like hydroxyurea or other chemotherapy agents and various antiviral agents as well would give rise to a macrocytic kind of a picture. If the MCV is low, as someone pointed out earlier, the differentials are very few. Most likely it would be either an iron deficiency anemia. In a small child, it could be a thalassemia trait or a thalassemia minor or a sideroblastic anemia. Mean corpuscular hemoglobin, that is hemoglobin into 10 divided by the RBCs. Again, if the MCH is low, then that would be like in iron deficiency anemia and in thalassemia. So the mean corpuscular hemoglobin is reduced. Mean corpuscular hemoglobin, it would be raised in any of the cases which have got a raised MCV. Mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration, again, would be reduced in all these other cases that I've said earlier with the low MCV and the low MCH. Raised MCHC is pretty much always seen in patients who have got some form of hereditary spirocytosis or acquired hemolytic anemias. RDW is nothing but what a pathologist would look at a peripheral smear and tell you whether there is an anisopoikilocytosis. So what does RDW say? It just tells you what is whether there is a variation in the shape and the size of the RBCs. For example, in microcytic anemia where the MCV is low, if your RDW is increased, then it is more likely to be iron deficiency anemia. If your RDW is normal, then more likely it is going to be a thalassemia trait. So these are the various values that you would see when you're looking at a hemogram. So this is the first case that I'm looking at. This is an 18-year-old boy who came to me with a 4-month history of transfusion-dependent anemia. He was getting one transfusion every month. He had had no response to hematinics. There was no jaundice, no lymphadenopathy, and no splenomegaly. So this is our hemogram. So if you look at this side, this is on the 7th of October. When he had first come to us, his hemoglobin was 6.5, packed cell volume. So the students could see that if you multiply it by 3, the hemoglobin into 3 is 19.9. Total leukocyte count was also low. Here the MCV is 91.2. Mean corpuscular hemoglobin is normal. Mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration is normal. The platelet counts were low. So he has a normocytic, normochromic anemia. And then we look at the differentials. You see a fair amount of lymphocytosis in this particular case. So we have got an 18-year-old who has got a pancytopenia, who has not responded to hematinics, and it is a normocytic, normochromic kind of a picture. So the possibilities in a young male, 18-year-old, who is not nutritionally deficient would be either an aplastic anemia or a hypersplenism. So anyway, he does not have a lymphadenopathy, could be a leukemia. Here the differential count on this peripherals, on this hemogram does not flag any abnormal cells. The peripheral smear, I'll be showing the peripheral smear down the line. I think it should have been here. Yeah, it's there. The Coombs test was weakly positive, but this is on. This was after several blood transfusions. This was just 1+. So yes, autoimmune hemolytic anemia with a low platelet count could be Evans syndrome, but one would expect a little more. And anyway, I will be showing other tests as well. So this is the peripheral smear showing anisocytosis, macrocytosis. The count is reduced, platelets are reduced. So WBC and low platelets will not be seen in autoimmune hemolytic anemia or Evans syndrome. The reticulocyte count. The reticulocyte count is 1.2. In one of our previous talks, I had described how to do a corrected reticulocyte count. So you need to have the packed cell volume. You take the normal packed cell volume as 45. So in this case, it would be 1.2 multiplied by 19.2 divided by 45. So that would give you a value of 0.53. So we always look at the corrected reticulocyte count. So the corrected reticulocyte count was within somewhat close to the lower part of the normal range. So that does not appear to be an evidence of hemolysis. The LDH was also normal in this case. It was done. We did a bone marrow. So the bone marrow aspirate and imprint smears, they were hypercellular. And here we look at the ME ratio. So we see that it is 1:3. It is reversed. So there is a erythroid hyperplasia which is going on in this bone marrow. We looked at the bone marrow biopsy. Bone marrow biopsy, the cellularity, as you can see, is normocellular. There are no abnormal cells. There is no myelofibrosis. Reticulin stain is 0. We were not expecting myelofibrosis anyway. There are no leukemic deposits or abnormal cells. The CD34 blast percentage was less than 1%. So what we have here is a young male who has got a pancytopenia kind of a picture with a normocytic normochromic anemia with erythroid hyperplasia on the bone marrow. No LDH report on file. Okay, we had not done the LDH in this case, but the reticulocyte count was low normal, so there is no hemolysis. We did the PNH. So the PNH here, as you can see, this person is deficient in the RBCs as well as in the WBCs. So there is a major PNH clone which has been detected. So the diagnosis in this case is a paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. After getting this report as well, I asked the patient, but he did not give any history of high colored urine either after getting up from sleep or during in the morning. He presented primarily with a pancytopenia. The treatment for this, we have a drug called eculizumab. It costs approximately $300,000 per year lifelong, particularly in those patients who are hemolytic or those who have got a thrombotic kind of a picture. This is one, but otherwise, the only curative option that we have for these kind of cases would be a bone marrow or a peripheral blood stem cell transplant. Case 2 is a 68-year-old male who came to us with a 6-month history of pallor and fatigue, never transfused till presentation. His liver and spleen were enlarged, approximately 4 centimeter each, below the costal margin. The ultrasound abdomen showed a hepatosplenomegaly. There were no liver changes to suggest a chronic liver disease. So a 68-year-old male with Hepatosplenomegaly, the differentials that would come to mind would be, let's say, a lymphoma, could be a tuberculosis, could be a chronic liver disease with splenomegaly, could be any other infiltrative disease in the bone marrow. So we looked at the peripheral smear. So now if you look at the hemogram, hemoglobin is 5.9. The total leukocyte count is normal. Platelet counts are also normal. And as we look at this MCV here, that is 87.8. MCH is normal. MCHC is also normal. So this is a normocytic, normochromic anemia. And there is a reduced production. So this is the first hemogram that we had done. So the person has never been transfused before. So we find that there is a reduced production, RBC count is reduced. What are the other differential that would come to us if we find a normocytic normochromic anemia and a reduced RBC count in with such low hemoglobin? That would be a pure red cell aplasia. However, this person has got a hepatosplenomegaly, significant hepatosplenomegaly, so that would not be that goes against a diagnosis of a pure red cell aplasia. Then we look at the differential count. So here we see that neutrophils, lymphocytes, and then as we go down, we see that there is some left shift as well. So, there are some band cells, there are metamyelocytes and myelocytes. So we look at the peripheral smear. The peripheral smear has shown few macrocytes, elongated RBCs. Here we also see some teardrop cells. The counts are otherwise normal, and the pathologist has also described that there is a mild shift to the left. However, because she saw a significant amount of microcytic hypochromic RBC blood cells, quite often when a hemogram goes to the lab, they do not have any clinical details. So they just look at the hemogram and try to make some kind of impression. As long as there are no abnormal cells, it's fine. But otherwise, they do not have the background. So they saw the severe microcytic hypochromic anemia. They advised serum iron studies. The reticulocyte count here, it appears to be increased. There is 4%. But if you do a corrected reticulocyte count using the packed cell volume or the hemoglobin, the corrected reticulocyte count is normal. So it is actually for the degree of anemia, the reticulocyte response is not actually adequate. This is the ferritin, 359. The iron levels were somewhat low. So this is like an anemia of a chronic disease. Stool occult blood is negative. There is no blood loss. Vitamin B12 and folate levels were normal. The urea and creatinine were somewhat deranged, but he is a diabetic. Perhaps that could be the reason. Calcium was otherwise normal. And the total protein is normal. I showed you the LFT because quite often you might have certain plasma cell dyscrasias like Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia or even lymphomas where you would have some degree of AG ratio reversal or an increase in the total protein. His LFT is almost unremarkable. So now what happens? I wanted to show you what happens to the blood picture after transfusion. So you must always try to get a hemogram and a peripheral smear before the transfusion. Now this is the 26th December was the one before transfusion. This is after transfusion. Here, as you can see, the RBC count has now increased. MCHC has increased because, in the stored blood, there are a lot of spirocytes. So the MCHC, the mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration has increased. There are still some myelocytes, metamyelocytes, that will not change. But now, because again, the pathologist does not have the background for this particular picture, this was the peripheral smear that they had mentioned on 26th December. Now, on 20th December, after the blood transfusion, there are lots of macrovalocytes. So they thought that it could be a vitamin B12 or a folate assay deficiency. So for difficult cases, you must always keep your pathology colleagues in the loop. And definitely you must try to get a hemogram and a peripheral smear right at the beginning, if possible, before a blood transfusion. So to continue with that case, the Coombs test here was negative. This was the free kappa and free lambda ratios. This was normal. This was done in case there is some kind of a plasma cell dyscrasia. There was no M spike. The LDH was marginally increased. It was 295. Here it was 110 to 210. just about marginally increased. So we kept a possibility of either a myelodysplastic syndrome, MDS MPN, actually, that was the diagnosis possibility that we had kept, or a lymphomatous involvement. The reason for this being there was a shift to left. So the bone marrow aspirate was difficult. We were not able to get a sufficient bone marrow aspirate. It was grossly diluted. Even the imprint smears, they did not give any clue. We waited for the biopsy, which we got the next day. And this showed there were no abnormal infiltrates. So there is no leukemic or a lymphoma infiltrate which is seen in this bone marrow, but there is an increase in the reticulin stain. So this person has a hypercellular marrow with myeloid prominence with fibrosis. So the diagnosis that we kept at this point of time was either a primary myelofibrosis. The MPN reflex panel that we do for JAK2 CMPL that is still pending. I was hoping to have got it by today evening, then I could have shared that with you. The other possibility that we have is a MDS MPN. Like, there are certain cases which do not entirely fit into a myelodysplastic syndrome. They do not entirely fit into a myeloproliferative disease. So we call them an MDS MPN. The chest X-ray has a mediastinal widening. So we have asked for a CT chest because in myelofibrosis, you can get extramedullary hematopoiesis. At the same time, sometimes you might have another malignancy and the myelofibrosis in the bone marrow could be a reactionary myelofibrosis to that particular malignancy. So this is the other case. Next case is a 56-year-old lady who presented to us with anemia since 7 months. Again, no response to hematinics. When she came to us, we noted that she had a massive splenomegaly, which was somehow never mentioned in her previous clinical notes at other places. So it is very important to also clinically examine your patients besides taking a good clinical history. So this lady, 56-year-old, had a massive splenomegaly with hepatomegaly and anemia since 7 months, no response to hematinics. This was the hemogram that we had. Again, the 22nd September and 29th September. This is pre-transfusion, this is post-transfusion. Hemoglobin is 5, somewhat slightly macrocytic kind of a blood picture. The MCH, MCHC is otherwise unremarkable. The mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration is reduced. Platelet counts were somewhat low here. It was normal here. Nothing much to comment upon that. If you look at the differential, the neutrophils are 79%, lymphocytes, metamyelocytes, myelocytes, again, nothing much to comment upon in this particular picture. The peripheral smear picture was mild anisocytosis, normocytic normochromic, no Rouleau formation, leukopenia with a lift shift. The reticulocyte count was 3.97, slightly increased. Coombs test was negative. This was the renal function. Again, one must remember that there is no real algorithm to a normocytic normochromic anemia. It is all a complete. So when you got a normocytic normochromic anemia, you need to have a good clinical history, a good examination, and then other peripheral biochemical findings with kidney, with liver, and various other tests as well. So in this particular case, as you can see, the renal profile was otherwise non-informative. The LFT was again also non-informative. There appeared to be some degree of indirect bilirubinemia. Beta 2 microglobulin was increased. It was 17.94. LDH was also slightly raised. So we did the bone marrow aspirate. This showed several plasma cells, a small number of mature plasma cells, which are constituting nearly 45% of the cells. We did the serum protein electrophoresis and IFE, where we found an M spike, which was an IgM kappa type. So this was essentially a case of a Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia, who presented with IgM kind of a monoclonal gammopathy with hepatosplenomegaly. This is a form of lymphoma. It is a kind of interface between lymphoma and plasma cell dyscrasias, an indolent lymphoma, plasma cell dyscrasia. And it is mostly treated as any of our indolent lymphomas. The next case is a 52-year-old, anemia since 2018, managed with hematinics. So this is what I was trying to say earlier, that no anemia should be ignored. And quite often we treat them with hematinics. They might respond initially, and then something is missed, and then they come back later with something far more sinister. So this was the hemogram in 2018. The hemoglobin was 10.1, slight macrocytosis. mean MCH was slightly increased. So that is, anything with macrocytosis, you would see a raised mean corpuscular hemoglobin. Platelet count was 280,000. Nothing much on the differential here. The peripheral smear had shown some macrocytosis. That's fine. So they asked for a vitamin B12 and folate. The B12 was actually quite low. This is in 2018. So vitamin B12 was very low. The urea creatinine was normal. And subsequently, he received vitamin B12 and folate. And there was no further follow up till 2020 when he became anemic once more. There was macrocytosis. Here you can see the RBC count is reduced. MCH is also increased. Again, that is because of macrocytosis. Once again, the vitamin B12 and folate levels were done. They were normal. He still received vitamin B12 and folate, did not respond. His urea and creatinine was normal. So this was a 52-year-old male who had anemia in 2018, and then thereafter continued to remain anemic, even received several blood transfusions. He was Coombs negative, LDH was normal. These reports were done outside on our request, so I do not have our own reports to show you. Serum free light chain showed an increased kappa, which was more than 12,500. M-band was 0.2, and bone marrow examination showed plasmacytosis. The PET-CT showed lytic lesions. So this was the bone marrow, which showed plasma cells in 95% of all, it was studied with plasma cells. This is a plasma cell myeloma. So this is a multiple myeloma. Now, multiple myeloma, as you know, most common presentation that we get in our routine practice is with kidney disease. But in this particular case, it presented with only anemia. The first time he presented with anemia was in 2018. So only anemia with transfusion as a presenting issue. No other target organ damage was there. In 2018, after correction of the anemia with nutritional anemia, so what we learned from this particular case is that even in those, at least in adults who have nutritional anemia, it is important to follow up at regular intervals for at least the next few months after the diagnosis of nutritional anemia, just to see whether you're not missing something else. Because, in this particular case, myeloma in all likelihood was coexisting with vitamin B12 deficiency at that particular point of time. The next case is a 61-year-old male who had fatigue 6 months prior to presentation. Please don't look at the case. I changed the order of the cases before, after making this presentation. So this is a 61-year-old male who was diabetic with prior history of coronary artery disease. He had some abdominal complaints, so his ultrasound was normal. He underwent an endoscopy, that was also normal. He received iron and vitamins, despite which his hemoglobin dropped, and his LFT and KFT was normal. So what could this be? So we looked at his hemogram. Hemoglobin was 6.8. Again, MCV was slightly macrocytic. RBC count was 1.98. So there is a hypoproliferative kind of a picture out here. There is a reduced production in the bone marrow. Platelet count was also reduced. So somewhat macrocytic. Hemoglobin is low. Platelet counts are normal. In a 61-year-old male who does not have any hepatosplenomegaly, the first differential that comes to my mind would be a myelodysplastic syndrome or some kind of marrow failure. So we looked at the peripheral smear. RBCs were macrocytic. Platelets were reduced. LDH was normal. Reticulocyte count is also inadequate for the anemia. It is actually reduced. The bone marrow was normocellular, some amount of hypocellular particles, and this was the bone marrow biopsy where it is 5 to 10%. So the diagnosis in this particular case at this point of time was a hypoplastic anemia, or what you would call as a aplastic anemia. We did the cytogenetics and there was a deletion of -Y. So this is a hypoplastic myelodysplastic syndrome bar aplastic anemia. In fact, I also got his PNH test done, which was positive. So he has a PNH clone as well. The next case is a 41-year-old IT professional, came to us with fatigue, routine check, examination showed anemia. Again, no response to Hematenex. And the peripherals, so initial blood picture which was done showed a hemoglobin of 8. This was outside. So the WBC was 2.16. Platelets were also normal. This was a normal. So MCV was just 95. So normocytic normochromic anemia in a 41-year-old who has come to us with fatigue. So again, one of the differentials that should be kept would be a malignancy. The peripheral smear had not been done outside. We saw the peripheral smear. We saw a couple of atypical cells which did not look entirely blastoid. So we did the bone marrow, and the bone marrow revealed that this person has an acute leukemia, which on flow cytometry showed that it is an acute lymphoblastic leukemia. So one needs to look at a peripheral smear. Needs to have access to a good peripheral smear, or a pathologist who can look at a peripheral smear and tell you whether they could see abnormal cells. The last case before we end the talk. So this is a patient who again is around 70-year-old who presented to us with a past history of coronary artery disease, diabetes mellitus, diabetic nephropathy, polypectomy, and a fistula with secondary infection. I put this case up, and the first case I discussed about the hypothyroidism is that just because I'm a hematologist, I do not want to be presenting all, or it doesn't mean that every normocytic normochromic anemia necessarily has something malignant within it. Quite often they would have something else as well. So this person, this is, he presented to us, this is a whole series of hemograms. We can look at the 23rd September one, hemoglobin 9.4, total leukocyte count was 8.4. I chose this case even though there was some amount of microcytosis. I'll tell you why. MCH is reduced. The differential was not very, it was not very informative to anything. Here the urea, as you can see here, diabetic nephropathy, urea was 142, creatinine was 1.84. We had done a serum protein electrophoresis and serum free light chain. Those were normal. He had a low serum iron, a raised TIBC, and a ferritin of 212. So one would say that this is pretty much a garden variety picture of an anemia of chronic disease. However, most of the presentation of anemia of chronic disease is not necessarily microcytic. In fact, most of the cases of anemia of chronic disease would present to you with a normocytic normochromic anemia. And in this case, even though the ferritin levels were 212, even though it is increased, I administered iron to this patient, because in somebody who has so much of inflammation, he had a fistula with a secondary infection, he has diabetic nephropathy, coronary artery disease, diabetes. He had recently been intubated and then had come out of intubation. He came to the OPD. I mean, he had survived all that, but one would have expected a much, much higher ferritin. So if you've got a ferritin, which is, we have a cutoff of 200, somewhat around 200. If you have somebody with this kind of ferritin with low serum iron, so he possibly has a concurrent anemia of chronic disease with iron deficiency. And so this person had received erythropoietin, and paradoxically his hemoglobin had fallen. They had not given him iron. So when we administered iron, he had a dramatic improvement in hemoglobin. And he's now has a hemoglobin of more than 10 for the last 3 months. So to conclude this, we must never ignore an anemia of any kind. The clinical history and clinical examination in combination with baseline test is very important. So once you made the clinical history and clinical examination, I'll be showing you what tests I do. In combination with those tests, you would then be able to make some kind of a decision as to what other test you are going to be doing further. Sometimes we tend to attribute a lower hemoglobin in certain populations and groups such as elderly people and women. Now, this is a potentially harmful approach, and that is why I did not give you ranges of hemoglobin for various other groups. I just gave you one particular hemoglobin cutoff. This is my investigation list that I do when I get somebody with a normocytic normochromic anemia. In addition to doing a complete hemogram, ESR with peripheral smear, I do LDH and reticulocyte count. This is pretty much standard for any hemogram. We do a Coombs test direct, iron profile including ferritin, vitamin B12 and folate, renal profile and liver profile, viral markers, of course, because if people might present with hepatitis C, HIV, and still have anemia. I do a protein electrophoresis with immunofixation electrophoresis. We might sometimes not have an M-band on protein electrophoresis, but you might detect it on immunofixation electrophoresis, serum free light chain ratio, and a thyroid function. This is my routine investigation kit for somebody who presents to me with a normocytic normochromic anemia. Thank you. So that's my mobile number and my email for any further questions at any point of time.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhas, for a nice overview of case-based. That's more easy to understand at times. Dr. Rahul, your comments or your add-ons on this topic?
No, I think this was a good way of presenting, how this was a bouquet of cases where everyone had normocytic normochromic anemia and moved on to different direction. And again, the emphasis in the end that, it's not necessary that all normocytic normochromic will have. This was the idea, was to see that, yes, things could be, this diverse also. So I think we should ask questions. The students must be having a lot of questions for us.
Somebody has asked why we did PNH. Any particular case you have in mind? I do not do PNH as a routine for all cases of normocytic normochromic anemia. If you're alluding to the first case that I presented, that young boy, 18-year-old, yes, the first case. So the young male, so the corrected reticulocyte count was less than 2.5. So why we should consider hemolysis as a differential? So PNH is not a very characteristic hemolytic anemia. Yes, it is. It does cause hemolysis, but in PNH, it is more of an ineffective erythropoiesis rather than your standard hemolytic picture where you have got very increased LDH or reticulocytosis. So in this case, when we have a young person or even any other adult with a pancytopenia kind of a picture, or even without pancytopenia, with just anemia, and you see erythroid hyperplasia in the marrow, and you have ruled out everything else, PNH is one of the differentials. So we would do a PNH as a part of the profile. Immunofixation electrophoresis and serum protein electrophoresis. So these we do to look for any monoclonal protein in the plasma or the serum. Sorry.
So as a physician, we do see cases of anemia of coronary disease. So what is your take-home points that when we suspect anemia of coronary disease? Because it's a very common scenario that patient coming normal normochromic anemia and patient having some other comorbidities. And we would suspect, okay, it's, but sometimes we don't get a classical picture of, as you have this case unfolded, that it's not sometimes, not every time macrocytic, sometimes normocytic, and iron may not be low. So what is your take home on that part?
So anemia of chronic disease, obviously the person should have some kind of underlying inflammatory process or a malignancy or chronic liver disease, even heart failure for that matter, a long-standing chronic problem. And then they present with anemia. And most of these cases would present to you with a normocytic normochromic anemia rather than a microcytic picture. The classic picture, of course, would be a low serum iron and a ferritin which is not low. A low serum iron and a low ferritin obviously would tell you that this is an iron deficiency, but a ferritin which is otherwise increased would tell you that there is some kind of inadequate use of the iron that is present, and that's because of the cytokines that are being released. But sometimes in our settings, we would have a combined iron deficiency and anemia of chronic disease as well, where the ferritin levels may not be as high as one would expect based upon the underlying inflammation. So if you've got a ferritin which is increased, and you or along with the picture of a normal iron or a reduced iron, then the diagnosis is of anemia of chronic disease. Of course, again, before you rule out, I showed you cases earlier as well. Even we had the patient with myelofibrosis, the first or the second case that I showed you. So the ferritin was increased. It was 389 in that particular case, normocytic normochromic. He probably also had some diabetes earlier. One could have just said this is anemia of chronic disease and given erythropoietin, but he turned out to have myelofibrosis. So
that
needs to be evaluated.
Yeah. So that's the same question I wanted to ask you. That is any doing of EPO levels in such cases?
Routinely? So EPO level, no, I do not do EPO levels. So I do EPO levels in just two conditions in my practice. So I do EPO levels in suspected cases of polycythemia vera. And the second category of patients I do EPO level are in low risk MDS who do not have blast, low risk MDS where I need to give erythropoietin. So if the EPO levels are more than 500, they will not benefit from erythropoietin. If they're less than 500, then we could give them a trial of erythropoietin. In my practice, these are the only two places where I do erythropoietin levels. They will not help you in anemia of chronic disease.
So a few questions in the chat box, if you could answer them.
Yes, I have started doing serum-free light chain assay in all cases, even when we are doing immunofixation, electrophoresis, and SPEP. That is because we do have light chain myelomas where the protein electrophoresis and immunofixation electrophoresis may not be informative. We have quite a few of such cases. We even have MGRS and renal, monoclonal gammopathies of renal significance, light chains. So where we only see serum-free light chain, which is abnormal, the other two tests are actually normal. Previously, they would be called non-secretory myelomas. What were the warning signs when dealing with normocytic normochromic anemia that needs thorough workup? I think the warning sign that I wanted to present as a conclusion is that the normocytic normochromic anemia itself is the warning sign for looking at anything in these cases. So like I showed you my last slide, that is my workup. In addition to taking a good clinical history, you examine the patient thoroughly and you do this battery of tests, at least the baseline test. So that will give you some kind of a clue as to where you should be moving forward. So the main warning sign, I think, is the normocytic normochromic anemia itself. In a case of vitamin B12 deficiency patient, why we thought of multiple myeloma? Yes. So in that particular patient, I forgot to point out that the LDH levels in that particular case was normal. So in patients with the vitamin B12 of, that in that person, the vitamin B12 level was just 60. Normally in these cases, the LDH levels would be increased. In that case, I'll show you the slide again backwards. So in that patient, the LDH levels were just about 166 or 200. It was not even increased. At that point of time, even if this person had come to me, I would have thought of vitamin B12 deficiency only, given them vitamin B12, but I would have called back the patient after a while again. So we do not have the interim blood reports. Yes, he could have been diagnosed earlier. So what I would normally do in my cases is that once I have diagnosed somebody with a B12 deficiency, we give vitamins and we call them back after a month, after 2-3 months. And if they continue to have anemia, so this is a male, 50-year-old male who is otherwise well nourished, he should have a hemoglobin of 15 to 17. So if after correcting his B12 deficiency, I call him back after 3 months and he still has a hemoglobin of 11 or 10, is when I would start suspecting that he has a normocytic normochromic anemia and something else could be the picture. It may not be myeloma, it could be anything else as well. It could be any other hematological malignancy, non-hematological malignancy, tuberculosis, or myeloma as happened in this case.
There's another question chat box.
CKD patient with normocytic normochromic anemia, do we need to work up in the same manner? Yes. One would be surprised at the number of chronic kidney disease patients who actually turn up with a plasma cell dyscrasia. We now have an entity which is called monoclonal gammopathy of renal significance. In both Patparganj and Vaishali, of late, we have now been retrospectively working up cases, and we have found quite a few cases who have turned out to be monoclonal gammopathy of renal significance and have benefited from treatment accordingly. So yes, CKD patient with normocytic normochromic anemia also, one must at least work up for, you need not do a bone marrow. I mean, you don't need to do a bone marrow to look for myelodysplastic syndrome. A good peripheral smear picture should be sufficient to tell you whether there is a leukemia or not, but definitely you should look for a myeloma. How common is bone marrow infiltration causing pancytopenia in tuberculosis? I only remember 2 cases. So we had a series of cases which we had presented when I was at AIIMS. That was one. And in the last 3 years, I just remember 2 cases where bone marrow infiltration had caused pancytopenia. Currently, my colleague in pediatric hematology is working out a case with pancytopenia, and the bone marrow had shown granulomatous lesions, and the lungs had suggestion of tuberculosis. That was the second case I was alluding to.
Dr. Mishra, for the benefit of students, what would be the indication of doing a bone marrow when it's only normocytic normochromic anemia, platelet, TLC, other things are okay?
Yeah. So so as you had noted in my series of tests that I had shown you, I did not put bone marrow aspirate and biopsy as my screening test. So my screening tests were just So these were my screening tests. I did not mention bone marrow aspirate and biopsy in these. The bone marrow aspirate and biopsy would come only if there is a protein electrophoresis or IFE or a serum free light chain which is abnormal. And if all of these are otherwise normal, person is continuing to be anemic, is when I would start thinking of a myelodysplastic syndrome and I would do a bone marrow. And of course, if the peripheral smear shows something.
So the take home would be that you should not rush onto bone marrow when you see such kind of cases.
This is my investigation list for somebody with a normocytic normochromic. The bone marrow does not come here. The bone marrow would come only later after you have gone through your history, the examination, and at least these baseline tests.
Right. One question is clarification that every case of pancreatitis need bone marrow?
So let us say we have a patient of chronic liver disease who has come with hypersplenism. So we have looked at the peripheral smear and there are no abnormal cells. Hemoglobin is say around 7 to 8. TLC is otherwise 2000. Platelet counts are 60,000, 70,000. I would generally not advise a bone marrow in such cases. But otherwise, all other cases of pancytopenia, yes, we would definitely advise a bone marrow, unless again somebody comes from you, Dr. Pankaj, with a typhoid fever, and we have typhoid. So again, that would not be an indication for a
right.
Or if you have got somebody who is on chemotherapeutic drugs or methotrexate toxicity, we have a clinical history which strongly suggests something which is not hematology specific. Then one need not do a marrow.
Right.
So yes,
an important question that comes, your investigation list in pancytopenia.
Sorry, sir?
Your investigation list in pancytopenia.
Yeah.
The question comes that what would you order in a case of pancytopenia?
Okay.
What
so
investigation?
Pancytopenia require
any case of no. Your investigation list that you have mentioned in normochromic anemia. Your investigation list in pancytopenia.
So this is an investigation list primarily for a normocytic normochromic anemia. The confusion is not with pancytopenia, sir. The confusion is more with somebody with otherwise a normal TLC, platelet, and just anemia. So this would be a investigation list for that. And once we get so if the complete hemogram shows a pancytopenia, which is not otherwise explained by a drug or a medication or a chronic liver disease, then a bone marrow aspirate and biopsy is definitely required.
So the patients with pancytopenia may need bone marrow aspiration quite often as compared to the normochromic anemia. That would be a take-home probably. So I think there are no more questions. Dr. Nathani, your concluding remarks.
No, I think it was a good session and the students have asked very relevant questions and the take-home message is also very clear. So, yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Nathani and Dr. Prabhas for a very interesting session on this very important topic. Dr. Ashok, you can conclude the session now.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is nice to sir. You have presented a case-based discussion of approach to normocytic normochromic anemia. It is very well and it is